Good morning, everyone. This is Rachel Deininger from Ohio EPA. We'll be starting the webinar in approximately 1 minute to give people a chance to log on. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ohio EPA's 2023 Sustainability Conference. My name is Rachel Deininger, and I am with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance at Ohio EPA. I will be moderating this morning's Lead, Guide, and Manage an Energy Efficiency Program session. Ohio EPA's 2023 Sustainability Conference has 12 sessions over 3 days. Registration information and a conference agenda are located on the Ohio EPA conference webpage, and we hope that you can join us for additional conference sessions. Please remember, it's never too late to sign up for the next conference session, and all sessions are being recorded for you to view later. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items to help you participate in the session. On this slide, you see an example screenshot of your attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer desktop on the right-hand side of your screen. For this presentation, you are listening in using your computer audio. If you are having sound issues or if the slides stop advancing, please try refreshing your browser. If that doesn't work, try logging off and logging back in. If you continue to have issues, please let us know in the Q&A pane, and one of our behind-the-scenes team members will try to assist you. Please feel free to submit questions to the presenters by clicking on the question mark icon and typing them into the questions pane on your attendee interface. You may send your questions in at any time during the presentation, and we'll do our best to try to answer the questions as they come in and during the Q&A portion. But if we don't answer your question during today's session, we will provide your question to the presenters to follow up via email following today's session. You can click on the document icon on your attendee interface to view included handouts. One of those handouts includes a PDF file of the PowerPoint slides used for today's presentation. This session is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording and a follow-up email along with a survey. The survey will also appear once the session ends. We value your feedback, and we greatly appreciate if you let us know how we're doing, or if there's anything we can do to further assist you. And with that, I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers. First, we'll be hearing from Joyce Parton from MS Consultants. Then we'll be hearing from Mohammed El Sayed with EA Energy Solutions. And last but certainly not least, we'll be hearing from Colin Calvis from Bricker Graydon. Behind the scenes and eager to help address your technical issues, we have April Stevens, Jessica Dalzell, and Helen Miller from Ohio EPA. And with that, I'll pass it over to our first speaker, Joyce Parton.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I really appreciate you joining us today. Hi, I'm Joyce Parton. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Energy Practice for MS Consultants. And I'm really excited, along with the panelists here, to be kicking this off for the Sustainability Conference. So thank you very much for allowing us to be your first look. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Ohio EPA. And from my perspective, I'm excited that they have done this, I think, every other year and provided this benefit to all Ohioans. They've been working for us since 1972, and they are here to protect us. They are protecting our most precious resources, like clean air and clean water. And they achieve this by focusing on those goals on the right, by offering compliance, permitting, maps, advisories, and education. You can find out more about what the Ohio EPA does for all of us at their website. And once again, thank you. So for today's topics, we're focusing on energy efficiency and how to lead, guide, and manage a program. So just want to make sure you're right in the right conference. Energy efficiency is something that we probably all think we understand, but we will review the definition and make sure we're on the same page. Next, we'll understand some of the components of energy initiatives, and we'll focus on processing as well as what we can do to make more energy efficient through equipment. We'll talk about funding and financing and how to jumpstart your program, but more importantly, keep it going for many years. We'll talk about engaging broad support for your energy program. The most successful programs will have broad support, and so we'll let you know our ideas on how to build it. And finally, we will go ahead and I will answer any questions that you have, and feel free, as instructed before, to use the chat box or the questions box to put any of those in there. We'll follow up with you afterwards. So here's another look at our panelists. I'm kind of bummed that we're not using cameras for this, but at least you could see sort of our names and faces. And once again, I work for MS Consultants. We're an architectural and engineering firm. We've been serving Ohio clients for the last 60 years. And I am a 35-year veteran of energy management. I support clients on energy reduction, carbon mitigation, and green energy solutions. And I'll ask Mohammed to introduce himself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mohammed Al Sayed, and I'm Director of Energy Services for EA Energy Solutions. 20 years in the energy and sustainability consulting business, registered mechanical engineer, had the luck to work with many companies on the Fortune 100 list, and also many schools, universities, and municipalities locally in Ohio and in the US, as well as internationally. So I'm glad to bring a lot of this experience for you today to talk about how we can lead, guide, and manage an effective energy efficiency program. And you're going to hear the word effective a lot today. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Colin?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks so much, Joyce, and thanks everyone for participating here. I am Colin Kelvis. I'm a partner at Bricker Graydon in our public finance department. I focus on economic development and even kind of more particularly how some of that work interfaces with some of these energy initiatives that we'll talk about. So really glad to be here. Joyce, I'm fine with using our picture. That picture of me is from a decade ago. So, you know, I'm looking nice and young there. I'm good. I'd rather have the picture than the webcam.
I hear you. We want to leave everyone with good memories. So, all right. Thank you to the panelists for participating. They've put together a lot of hard work to prepare for this. There we go. So energy efficiency, why pursue it? There are many reasons why you may desire your business to become energy efficient. But I hear the one most often from our clients is to cut the budget. And however you may feel like you need to go about cutting the budget, looking at sort of what your utility bills is usually the #1 thing that people first do. However, you may have other goals. You want to reduce your carbon footprint and join others and other communities and businesses in being more sustainable. So please consider this question. Take a moment to think about it, write your answer down, help make this session for you interactive of why you want to be more energy efficient. So what is energy efficiency? Energy efficiency refers to any method where less energy is consumed to attain the same amount of useful output. And output could be anything like heating your home or making a product or lighting the office. There are opportunities for energy efficiency everywhere. And the example that I'm providing here is for the common light bulb. So let's say you have a 60-watt traditional bulb and you want to reduce energy. You may substitute in an LED luminaire, which is typically around 12 watt for that same sort of light level. And so you have taken the same amount of output, but you've used less energy to achieve that goal. Across the board, there are a lot of different products that are out there that can help you with your energy efficiency goals. However, there are other behavioral aspects that you can employ as well. Typically, we would refer to that as energy conservation. So the example that I have here is that I would just maybe take a cooler shower, not run the water so hot. I've changed my behavior, but I've used less energy at the same time. Or in an industrial setting, maybe I run large industrial fans in my warehouse and I may lower the speed. So I've done something to change my behavior, not necessarily just upgrade my equipment. At the end of the day, both of them will achieve your same goal of reducing your carbon footprint or cutting your energy budget. Green energy has been a focus over the last 5 years, and we hear a lot of talk in the news media about renewable energy like solar or wind. But energy efficiency is not playing a lesser role. In fact, the investments for that are higher than ever. The state of California has approved $4.3 billion in energy efficiency efforts from 24 through 2027. And in fact, globally, the levels of investment are expected to reach $600 billion recorded in US dollars and $624 billion throughout the end of this year. The built environment continues to be the largest investment. So you could see here on the chart that the green bars reflect a steady increase in investment levels. But the blue bars are catching up, and the blue bars relate to the transportation sector. The transportation sector is expanding mainly due to electrification of vehicles. So if you're thinking about how to electrify your fleet, now may be the time to start planning, because it could also improve your energy efficiency aspirations. Let's take a look here at building usage. Those were the green bars. The U.S. Energy Administration, they sponsor a commercial building energy survey that we call CBEX. It's a study done about every 3 to 4 years to determine if buildings are achieving the mark in higher energy efficiency. They will not only look at the total energy intensity, but they'll also look at it by use. So in this energy wheel, this gives you a great indication of the breakdown of how energy is used in a building. Space heating at 32% is one of the larger categories, followed by ventilation at the bottom, which is also related to conditioning of air. The next that follows is lighting. So there is a lot of equipment in your building that can be upgraded, but the biggest opportunities would be in space heating, ventilation, or lighting. So that sounds fine, but how does that help me to achieve my goal of improving my operating budget? So if we look at the triangle here, I put compact fluorescent lighting, or some may still be using incandescent lighting on the bottom, because we often think of that as the low-lying fruit. So if you did a lighting upgrade, and if it was a 50% efficiency gain in the product, but it is only really worth 10% of your bill, the overall effect on your operating budget would be 5%. HVAC assessment, I used an example of 25% gain in efficiency, but it has a larger effect on your bill, being 32% of your bill. And so it has a larger effect on overall cutting your budget of 8%. And if you stack all of these together, you could get a total of a 25% gain. So if you have a $100,000 operating budget and you can do several different measures for improving energy efficiency, you could save $25,000. And I'm sure that we could all use that money for something else within our budget. Next, I'm going to ask Mohammed to share with us some of the energy lifecycle team and process used in starting an energy efficiency program.
Good morning, everybody. So I would like to talk to you today about the life cycle of an energy efficiency project or program, we often get involved in an energy efficiency program at a high level, not necessarily involved in the day-to-day of what happened in the program, but we need to keep track of the project, or we need to lead the project, or need to be at least informed of what's going on. So basically, what we're trying, or what I'm trying to do today, is to give a horizontal cut, basically provide the information that somebody who would lead, manage an energy efficiency program to understand the various aspects that goes into this. So on the screen right now, we have the different components that goes into an energy assessment or energy improvement or an energy implementation. So I know Joyce introduced a different array of projects that you can implement, and this framework, so to speak, is applicable to any one of them. So I like to have a plan in going into any project. So today I'm introducing the way that we internally have developed some tools for our clients to use in an energy efficiency program like this. So we sit with them and we develop a project objective. I would like to work with a singular objective. So Joyce mentioned you want to decarbonize, you want to lower your energy utility bills, or singular objective means everybody's focused on achieving one thing and one thing only, and this makes a lot of difference on the success of the project. Now, that objective can be split into different goals or milestones along the way, but all of them kind of funnel into that one specific objective. So usually the objective and the goal of a project are set before the project starts. So occasionally a team will be selected before the goal have been set, or a goal has been selected before the team, set before the team have been selected. So this part of the process is kind of dynamic, depending on the organization structure, who needs to be involved when and why. So when we get to the team slide, we'll talk in detail about who should be part of your project team. But in general, project team need to have everybody that the project will impact, more or less. I am giving a full cycle of a project. Sometimes your project will end at the study phase or the implementation phase. But ideally, you want to implement what you have studied or implement the improvements that you have studied, and also verify that it is working the way you expect it to work. So this is the recommended approach for an energy efficiency project, but not always ideal is what we get in life. All right, so in setting project objective, what do we keep in mind? So the project objective is the main, like I mentioned before, it's the main goal. It's the main purpose of getting this team together and getting up in the morning to work. So one singular object, or basically for an organization, this will be the equivalent of a vision. So this will be your vision statement. must be specific and must be measurable. If we are going to study it, we have to be able to say, okay, we are going to reduce energy consumption by this. We're going to increase our renewable by that much. It has to be measurable as well. All right, so the objective can be discussed among the team. Again, depends on when the team gets involved. The objective gets refined throughout the project, maybe not changed, but more refined, because you occasionally will run into implementation issues, study issues, budget issues. Regardless of what it is, what you start with may not be what you end with, and that's okay, because what you end with is going to be better than your starting point. So as long as you're moving the organization in the right direction, it's okay that what you start with and what you ended with is not the same thing. I'd like to remind everybody also that, you can send your questions in as I'm speaking. If you think of something that you're worried about forgetting, put them in the chat. I'm keeping an eye out for questions. Okay, so after we have defined our objective, then we need to split this into measurable progress goals. So measurable progress goals, it help with a lot of things. It help, with the team feeling accomplishment as they're hitting milestones. It help the organization see that the people time that's getting spent on this project is not being wasted. So setting milestones is very important for a lot of reasons. And also it is it is a very impactful in the overall success of the project. I do have a couple points here on the slide, excuse me, that talk about how that the goal should not expand the objective. So the goal is a subset of the objective, but not an add to it. So I see it sometimes where as we're putting goals, ideas would creep in. So basically we started with a solar project. I would encourage everybody to do more. But for tracking purpose, I think having each project being its own separate individual entity, so to speak, help keep the focus on what the singular objective is. So do more, no problem. Just track it as a separate, its own project. Okay, so who should be on the energy team? So the energy team are the people who are going to execute every aspect of this project, and also going to be your research partner in the success of the project. It can be internal stakeholders. So if the project is about, green parking lot or green roof or solar shading or whatever it is, get feedback from the team. So you need internal member of the organization to give you feedback. External stakeholders, who are these? Okay, so your consultants, your research partners. If you want to implement something in your organization and you don't know if it was successful before, I encourage you, as any leader of an energy efficiency program, to do some research on what technologies are working within your region and what technologies are not working. Speaking specifically for Ohio, maybe it's more of a wind state than a solar state. I'm not claiming this at all. What I'm saying is do the research, see what works for other people. So as part of your team, you may need to have external research partners. Who else should be on your team? Contractors help you price projects, help you with verification. So you will have plenty of internal and external contractors and consultants that get involved in different parts of the project. And this is a good point to mention that the milestones help track who is responsible for what and when the handover is done between, let's say, the internal research team and your consultants who are doing the design or the implementation. This high-level organization can keep a lot of things done right from the first time, better than having to fix it at the end. All right, so a couple more slides in the next 5 minutes to talk about basically this slide here and where I spend 90% of my awakened time is the study part. So we we focus on help our partners or our clients understand what their energy consumption looks like and what a good way of reducing it or supplementing it with solar. So when you go into a study of any sort within your organization, it goes through the phases that you have on the slide right now. So we do a lot of data collection in the beginning. So on top of your own research, which is very helpful for us as external consultants coming in, understand your organization, it's better have save yourself also a lot of money, have a good understanding documented of the procedures and, equipment and things that we will need to interact with. On top of that, we do more data collection to understand the behavior of the building, behavior of employees. The data collection can be solar sensors, so we can get solar exposure in the building, can be temperature sensors within the space to understand how you run your HVAC system. Plenty of data collection methods. For the aspects that are appropriate for the project. Analysis. We can spend a whole day just talking about analysis all the way from hand calculation to artificial intelligence goes into analysis. As somebody who's leading the organization or leading the project, the analysis phase is when we take all this data and marry it with the objective and the project goal. So we take the data, analyze it to see what's the best track to take to achieving the project objective. And that will lead us to explore options. So we'll look at different options working with partners and things of this nature. Pricing, we discussed this briefly. Consultants work together to do pricing for the project. And then we work with different internal stakeholders to get budgets approved and to move this through the internal mechanism, whatever that is. Once we have some sort of blessing, so to speak, from the organization, then we finalize our recommendation, and then that when we get into the implementation phase. Implementation phase, this is when more consultants gets involved. and that's the design consultants. They put together design documents if necessary. Again, some projects, like Joyce was mentioning, just behavioral changes. You don't need outside consultants or design consultant, but maybe you need coaches, or you need somebody to do surveying to see if the behavior changes are actually happening or not. So whatever the implementation looks like, that can be program or can be equipment. Troubleshoot, basically troubleshoot, again, can be a program or can be equipment. Is it working? Is the implementation working? Yes, it's not working. Then let's see why it's not working. And then you have finalized your implementation, and now your verification depends on the project, what it was. There's different KPIs that you need to verify. If you are doing a project on the consumption side, then you have to do some submetering of some sort, again, for your own internal requirement for a utility company that's incentivizing the project, or for a third party that is providing financing. And with this, I will turn it over to Colin so he can talk to us about financing, because none of the stuff I mentioned is free, and it sure is not cheap either. So, Colin.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mohammed. So yeah, if you're keeping a roadmap in your mind of what we've talked about, Joyce, helpfully walked us through what is energy efficiency, what is sustainability, what are these energy initiatives, and why are they important. Mohammed just talked through project implementation, how you actually work on projects to further those goals that Joyce talked about. And as Mohammed just mentioned, we want to turn now to talk a little bit about some ways that communities can help to finance these initiatives. So this portion of the presentation is maybe also known as the show me the money portion. So let's get into that. The two things that we'll talk about regarding how to pay for some of these initiatives are PACE financing and the Inflation Reduction Act. And as we go through some of these slides, there's going to be more information on here than I'm going to really discuss in detail. And so the slides are meant to be a resource, so please make sure to download that as a handout so that you've got that available to refer to following the presentation. PACE financing stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing, PACE, and the clean energy portion of PACE has really actually been expanded in most places to also include energy efficiency. And so what really is it? Well, PACE financing is an alternative mechanism to pay for clean energy and energy efficiency improvements. So often when a building owner, whether that's a governmental entity or a private entity, wants to make improvements to their building, they need to either pay for that in cash or find some type of financing for that. And historically, financing can come through something like a mortgage loan, where there's an obligation to pay on a loan agreement and a note, and there is a mortgage put on the property as collateral for the repayment. You might also have something like lease purchase financing, where building owner is actually leasing equipment from a vendor for a period of time and making payments to sort of fully pay for the asset, and at the time that it's over, getting ownership of it. There's some other alternatives historically as well, but the innovation of PACE is that it adds another way to pay for those kinds of improvements. And what it does is leverage the special assessment mechanism that exists really by state law as part of the real property taxation power, and uses that as both the payment and security for loans that can be made to finance these kinds of projects. So in a PACE transaction, a PACE lender will provide the upfront funding to pay for qualifying energy efficiency or alternative energy, renewable energy improvements. In exchange for that, the property owner will have special assessments levied against their property that are in an amount that's needed to pay down the loan over time. So similar to like a mortgage payment that you would pay over time, the assessments are repayment of principal and payment of interest over time. Those assessments are secured by the state's need for real property taxes. So if the building owner doesn't pay the assessments, the consequence is the same as if they're not paying other real property taxes, and there could be a foreclosure or other kind of enforcement. That lien is superior to other types of liens like mortgage liens or mechanics liens, and so it provides really good security for the PACE lender, but that lien is not subject to acceleration. So just as the local government can't come in and make a property owner pay future year property taxes today, a PACE lender working with the local government cannot force a property owner to pay future PACE assessments today. Only amount that can be enforced through foreclosure is any unpaid sort of delinquent special assessment amounts. And so that balancing has created a really strong and good market for PACE financing, particularly in the state of Ohio. Ohio is the second largest user of commercial PACE financing behind only California. And, you know, Ohio is not the second largest economy, so we're punching above our weight in terms of the uptake of commercial PACE financing versus kind of the overall size of our economy. Why would you go to PACE instead of one of the other alternatives that are available? Well, for one, PACE typically offers long-term fixed interest rate loans. Because of that really strong security position that the assessments have, PACE lenders are typically comfortable in extending loans that have lives of up to 30 years, if that matches the useful life of the assets that are being financed, and giving a fixed interest rate for that entire time. And so that is not available in other lending markets. A 30-year fixed interest rate loan is just something that you won't find in other alternatives, but you will find it with PACE. Another thing that can be achieved through PACE is 100% financing without any down payment. That typically happens in a retrofit situation where a building owner of an existing building needs to do qualifying improvements. They can get a PACE loan that covers the entire cost of those improvements in many cases. Typically, they're non-recourse, so there's no personal guarantees, there's no lien on corporate assets, it's just a special assessment lien on the improved property. Payments can be passed through to tenants. So if you have a building that's leased by different tenants, often under those leases, the tenants are responsible for paying property taxes, and so that would hold true as well for the PACE assessments. So a building owner can improve the building and pass the payment obligation to the tenants. The tenants are probably okay with that because they're also likely paying the utility bills. And so if the improvements result in a reduction in their utility bill, but an increase in their property tax bill, you know, maybe it's an even trade for them, or at least a trade that's worthwhile. The loan can also transfer with the property. So unlike a mortgage that would, in pretty much every case, need to be paid off if the property were to be sold, a PACE assessment, like other types of real property taxes, can remain with the property even if ownership changes hands. That doesn't have to happen, but it can, and we've seen it happen to good effect in Ohio. So Ohio has a good, robust commercial PACE law. Ohio does have authorization for residential PACE, but it's a whole kind of different ballgame. So we'll just focus a little bit on commercial PACE here. Really, any type of commercial building owner can use PACE financing in Ohio. That could be for-profit commercial building owners for things like retail, hotel, restaurant, office building, even multifamily housing, as long as it's 4 or more units. It can also be for industrial and manufacturing, it can be for agricultural, but also in Ohio, and this is not true in every state, but nonprofits and local governments can use commercial PACE financing. They can voluntarily ask to have their property assessed, even if they don't pay normal real property taxes. And if they do that, the only thing that shows up on the tax bill is the assessment. There's no triggering of general property taxes. Another benefit of PACE is that it layers well with other kinds of incentives. So as a community leader, you might be thinking, well, if I want to have a PACE program that can either help me pay for upgrades to my own buildings or help my property owners pay for upgrades to their buildings, what's the impact on some of the other things that we offer them in order to spur investment? And the good news with PACE is that it fits really well with other kinds of incentives, even incentives that would abate or redirect real property taxes. So just like in the nonprofit and governmental situation, if a property has a tax abatement, you can still layer on a PACE assessment over top of that. It doesn't impact the abatement would still apply, but the PACE assessment would then be collected as a way to, again, finance implementation of energy efficiency or alternative energy improvements. There are a bunch of other kind of incentives that can be layered nicely side by side with PACE, and we've seen a lot of that activity in gut rehab, adaptive reuse, and new development contexts. And I won't go into those in detail, but the takeaway is, in Ohio in particular, PACE works very well with other kinds of incentives that a community might be offering. So what's the local government involvement in PACE? Well, we've mentioned that it takes a special assessment, which is really a property tax mechanism, in order to make PACE work. And so the special assessments can only be levied by local governments. They are the entities that have the power to do that. And in Ohio, particularly, the two types of local governments that can do it are municipal corporations, which are cities and villages, or townships. And so in administering a special assessment program for PACE, a local government can really direct policy. They can review and approve each project application that comes through and make the ultimate decision on whether it's a correct and appropriate candidate to use this type of financing. The special assessments also flow through a local governmental process before they're paid back to the PACE lender. So the local governments are really integrated in PACE, really everywhere throughout the country, but particularly in Ohio. And so just as a way to sort of contextualize this, how does this end up working? Well, in Dayton, there was an old manufacturing facility that was going to be adaptively repurposed into condos and apartments, and then also into first floor retail. And the building was this cool historic building that had these really neat historic windows, kind of what you might expect to see in a big old former industrial building like this. But a lot of them were broken. They were incredibly inefficient, single pane kind of things. And so as part of the overall project, the developer needed to really improve the energy building envelope performance of this building. They were also, though, getting historic tax credits. And with historic tax credits comes the requirement to keep the facade the way that it looked historically. And so to solve that, they had designed and fabricated these really neat windows that exactly matched the way that historic windows work, but were very energy efficient. And they used PACE. They got a Port Authority loan from the Dayton-Montgomery County Port Authority to pay really mostly for those windows. And I shared now, this project is actually done and they've actually paid off their PACE loan, but I have a colleague at Ricker Graydon who lives in the Delco lofts, and he tells me that the windows are phenomenal. He can stand by them in the winter and he doesn't feel cold. He can stand by them in the summer and he feels nice and cool. So I guess that all worked out. That's kind of how PACE can work to help pay for energy efficiency improvements. We also do want to take a quick glance at the Inflation Reduction Act. Maybe you've heard of this, it's been in the news a little bit, but at a glance, there are $369 billion allocated by the federal government over the next 10 years to pay for some of these kinds of initiatives. And here's a gigantic list of some of the things that are available under the Inflation Reduction Act. The policy that the IRA is really attempting to further is to really move us beyond fossil fuel energy consumption and get us into clean energy consumption instead. And part of that is in building performance, and part of it is also in vehicle performance. So there's a lot of things in the Inflation Reduction Act dealing with alternative vehicle fuel mechanisms. The key takeaway, though, for this session on the IRA is that there have been some big changes to the ways that federal tax incentives for energy efficiency and alternative energy projects work that now allow local governments to take advantage of them. So historically, if you're a local government, you don't pay federal income tax. How do you take advantage of something that is a credit against your federal income tax obligation? Well, maybe you just don't. Maybe you get into a power purchase agreement where you can transfer some of the credit to a private entity that can take advantage of it. It's a little bit complicated. The big change in the IRA is that local governments can now apply for and receive the value of the tax credits as direct payments from the federal government. So if a local government does something that qualifies for one of the tax credits, they can file a return with the IRS, and that return will result in the payment of that credit directly to the government, even though they don't have a federal income tax obligation. The other key takeaway about the Inflation Reduction Act is that there are now tremendous bonus factors available to enhance the value of those credits. So historically, there was like a base value of a credit, and you could either claim that or not. Now there is a base value of the credit, but then there are also all kinds of bonus factors that you can add on to make the credit worth even more than what it would otherwise be worth. And so to sort of just quickly wrap this up and contextualize it, how does that maybe work? Well, one of the very common credits that has been available is the investment tax credit. And this is a credit that's based on the upfront cost of a project. So if you're doing a solar project and it costs $3 million, the basis of this credit has to do with that $3 million. The base rate of the credit, if the project qualifies, is 6% of the cost. So again, if you have a $3 million project, you could get a credit equal to 6% of $3 million back. But as we talked about, there are now a bunch of bonus factors that are available, including you can get a 5 times increase in the value of the credit if certain prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements are met. You can also get additional incentives based on a project's costs or geography that can potentially increase the value of that credit up to 70% of the costs of the improvement. So you might end up in a situation where you're only paying 30% yourself, and you're getting direct payments back from the federal government worth 70% of the project's costs. And obviously, there's a lot of different compliance and things that we need to think about when we actually do and try to claim one of those credits. And we can, talk about that in more detail if you've got questions about it. But that's a little bit of a snapshot of how that works. Also, just briefly before we get to the question and answer period, wanted to show this map because one of the bonus factors has to do with whether a project is located within an energy community. And there are some definitions for how that works. It has to do with census tracts and historical factors within the census tracts. But as you can see, a very large chunk of Ohio is within at least one of these kinds of energy communities, and some of them in kind of the most valuable in terms of bonus factor energy communities. So there are bonus factors out there potentially available for projects within Ohio, whether that's a local government project or whether that is a private project. And so with that, I know we want to leave definitely sufficient time to engage with your questions and answers. We can talk all day about this stuff, but we really want to hear what is on your mind and not just what we're thinking about. So I think we've already got a couple of questions in the question section. Looks like we're engaging with those. That's great. Keep those coming, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in the next few minutes here.
All right, so I think first we're actually going to pass the presentation over back over to Joyce for a few minutes.
I don't think I have control of the mouse. There we go. Okay. All right. So what did we learn today? Energy efficiency and energy conservation will both save you money. Energy efficiency programs is not just going out and changing out equipment. It's a process. And you want to understand, like you would with any project in your community or business, how to first set your goals and objectives and move on from there. There is other mechanisms that are available other than sort of your capital expenditures and worrying about what the payback is. You could pay down some of those paybacks through some of the government grants and loans that Colin had discussed. And be smart, take advantage of some of the IRA programs that are available. We talked a lot about stakeholders here and sort of who could help you to lead, guide, and manage. And so I just thought I would share with you what I thought there would be in terms of titles and people that can be involved in your project. So the executive sponsor may be someone that has the title of Chief Operations Officer or CEO. Maybe you're the city manager or the mayor. You would sit at the top of this pyramid. Your advisors, as Mohammed suggested, are external, but they can be the administrators on your staff. So some of those advisors may be your vendor partners. You know, don't be afraid to go out and get those quotes because you're going to learn something from those vendors while they're proposing on your projects. Talk to other researchers and developers, perhaps a local university or the schools who are sponsoring capstones may be able to give you interns that could put together a fair amount of brainpower for a project. And then on the administrative side, I would see who is looking at the utility bills and responsible for the budget itself. Marry them with the facility director and get their heads together and you'll come up with some great ideas. So it's time to get started. You can get started today by simply putting together your baseline map, collecting those utility bills, and there are free websites like the Energy Star Portfolio Manager where you could track. You can't save what you haven't measured, right? So get yourself a good start and then put together the roadmap as Mohammed had suggested. Treat this project as you would any other goal and objective in your organization. So create a mission, create a energy council who's responsible for that mission and give them objectives. Don't set goals without providing tools. The team will be frustrated and their efforts will be minimized if you don't provide them the tools. So some of the incentives that may be helpful is examining your own fiscal policies and procedures to make sure that they are aligned with energy management, or perhaps rewarding your employees with performance metrics to encourage them to think about energy management. On the infrastructure side, metering is always a great place to start so that you know how much your equipment is actually using, and provide simple dashboards so people could see their progress. And then on the education side, look through case studies. There are tons of websites out there with case studies. The Department of Energy Better Buildings Challenge has a lot of great commercial office building and also industrial case studies that you could see. So these tips and tools will help your team to be successful and to allow them to think about how they could change their behaviors in the workplace. All right, I think we have a couple questions, and thank you very much for participating by providing them. And let's go through them. So.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce, and thanks to all of our presenters today. Now we're going to go and answer a couple of questions, and you do still have a few minutes to submit questions through our questions pane. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible, but if we don't get to your questions today, we'll be providing the questions to our presenters in a follow-up email following today's session so they can get back in touch with you. So our first question looks like it's for Joyce, and that question is, how effective is energy efficiency in reducing carbon footprint?
Thank you. Yes, we haven't really talked a lot about the link to that, but there are a lot of statistics out there that in fact, say globally, if we all worked on this together, a 2% improvement in energy efficiency would reduce global energy-related carbon dioxide emissions by the amount of gigatons, right? So it can be significant. But I would advise the person posing the question that your best strategy is to first think about energy efficiency before supply side. We may often look at green energy, you know, how could I buy RECs, or should I put solar on my roof? And all of that will help to improving your carbon footprint. But first you want to make sure you've reduced your usage primarily. So let's say you use 100 units of energy, just trying to keep things very simple, and you have a 30% reduction in energy efficiency. Now you have 30 less units of energy to buy, right? Whether it be gas or electricity. And so this way, the total amount that you have to buy in green energy as you provide those projects will ultimately be less themselves. So don't skip over energy efficiency while you're trying to green up your source.
All right, thanks, Joyce. And it looks like our next question is for Mohammed. And that question is, in your opinion, what building systems have the best payback? And in other words, what systems should we look at first?
I think this is a great question. Lighting typically does have the best payback. Renewable energy tend to have longer HVAC, somewhere in the middle. But what I want to bring up is the combination of projects. A lot of times, people rush into investing money into a quick payback project without considering another project that can be joined together. So for example, if you do a 3-year payback lighting project, this is fantastic. You show energy efficiency and reduction quickly. However, it may hurt an implementation of an HVAC project because the HVAC project is 8 years payback. Have these two projects been done together, the overall project will be 5 years payback. So yes, it's important to know what is the payback, but also important to know what impact does this short payback have on future projects.
Thanks, Mohammed. Now, real quick, we have a question for Colin. And that question is, can PACE and any of the IRA incentives be used together on the same project?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. They definitely can, and this a little bit goes back to the discussion about layering different incentives. But one of the components of PACE is that the ownership of the assets that are financed, even though they're financed through a special assessment mechanism, which historically triggers governmental ownership in folks' minds, they stay with the property owner. So if a property owner puts in, solar panels on top of their building, they are the ones that own those solar panels, and the tax credits follow asset ownership. And so if the property owner owns the solar panels, they are also the one that has the right to apply for and potentially receive the Inflation Reduction Act different tax credits. So yeah, you could end up in a situation where you're using PACE to pay for the upfront costs of a rooftop solar project. And then you're using on the back end, once it's completed, the maybe investment tax credits or production tax credits under the IRA to reduce the cost of that system, and maybe even get you to the point where you can kind of pay off your PACE loan quickly. There was a question in the chat about how long does it take to start receiving those payments, and you can't start receiving them until the project is complete, and then there's a 5-year period over which you do receive them. So you do need to arrange for some kind of bridge financing or have the ability to finance through completion before you start getting the payments, and PACE is a way that you can potentially do that.
Interesting. It seems like there's a lot of good ways to combine financing there. All right, I think that's all the time we have for questions today. We do have a couple minutes left though, so if you have any more before the session ends, please feel free to put them in the questions pane, and our presenters will follow up with you following the webinar. And I want to thank all our presenters again, and thank you all for joining us today. This webinar has been recorded, and you will be receiving an email after the webinar with a link to the recording and a link to the session survey. Before we end the session today, we would also like to point your attention to Ohio EPA's Recycling and Litter Prevention Grants. Ohio EPA's yearly recycling grant program supports communities, nonprofits, businesses, and schools to initiate or expand recycling programs, encourage sustainable practices, stimulate economic growth, and support litter prevention efforts through 5 different grants. Applications are online and open October 2nd and close December 1st. Please visit recycleohio.gov for more information. We'd also like to call attention to our Encouraging Environmental Excellence Award program. The Encouraging Environmental Excellence program has 3 categories that recognize Ohio businesses, industries, trade associations, professional organizations or nonprofits, Ohio K-12 public or private schools, and local governments for environmental stewardship commitments and practices. Online applications are open for the 2024 award cycle and will close on April 30th, 2024. To learn more, visit epa.ohio.gov/OhioE3. Before we end, please check out our upcoming sessions for the 2023 Sustainability Conference. Join us at 10:30 a.m. for Think Globally, Act Locally, Sustainable Solutions for Communities, where attendees will hear from local sustainability leaders from the City of Oberlin, the City of Bexley, and the City of Dayton. Following that session, join us at 1 p.m. for Federal Funding for You to hear a discussion on Ohio's efforts to capitalize on Inflation Reduction Act funding. Last up today, please join us for Feeding People, Not Landfills, Food Waste Reduction and Diversion to hear about food waste reduction and diversion solutions and techniques from a diverse panel of experts ranging from the reallocation of edible foods to composting what's left. Once you leave, you'll receive a survey. We value your feedback and would greatly appreciate it if you let us know how we're doing and let us know if there's anything else we can do to further assist you. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with links to view the recording of today's session, a certificate of attendance, and another link to the survey if you don't get a chance to complete it now. And with that, we'll end this session of Ohio EPA's 2023 Sustainability Conference. We hope you can join us for other conference sessions. Thank you again for joining us and have a wonderful day.